Hello, fellow souls with bodies, and welcome back to the What I've Learned of Magic podcast with me, your host, Morgan Rodheimer. If you hear some shuffling about, my cat's being pretty active today, so I apologize in advance. But today's episode is actually inspired by this week's astrology, which I'm actually pretty excited about. This weekend is the Virgo full moon, and there's a Venus and Mars conjunction in the sign of Aquarius on Wednesday and Thursday, I believe. Granted, you're probably already feeling it because they're not that far away from each other even right now. So I'll get into the astrology real quick so that you guys are up to speed for those of you who don't know astrology, and then I'll get into the topic of this week, which is self-love and self-care rituals. Now, you're probably wondering what the Virgo full moon and the Aries and Venus conjunction, Aries, did I say Aries? Mars and Venus conjunction in Aquarius have to do with self-love rituals. Well, there's two ways. Well, actually, more than that, but two main ways today is that one, my very first ritual that I ever did was a full moon ritual, and that was also a self-love ritual. It was the first time that it had ever become a part of my life and been important to me. And then the second part is that sorry, I got a notification. The second part is that the astrology itself sort of lends itself to learning more about self-care, self-love, and self-worth. See, the Virgo full moon, let's break it down. So a full moon is an opposition of the sun and the moon. The sun being our ego and the moon being our mood, emotional space, deep inner self. And the moon will be in Virgo, which is about the details, the tiny things, but also problem solving and being analytical. Virgo is blessed with the ability to solve problems, but when in an unhealthy state, they can be a little hypercritical, both of themselves and others. And generally this criticalness has to do with being self-critical first and then that projecting outwards, because Virgo is a very internal sign. Same as Pisces. So the moon will be in Virgo and the sun will be in Pisces, which is the season that we're in. And that's how you determine what astrology season you're in, is where the sun is. And Pisces is the opposite sign of Virgo in every way, shape, and form, except that they are both definitely meant to be more internal signs. But with Pisces, they're almost too forgiving sometimes. And I feel like the balance of these two energies, one that is so overflowing with emotion and love and the big picture of humanity all being one, with Virgo looking down at the tiny details and our personal well-being and problem solving, it really boils down to love and boundaries. Pisces is a very complicated sign because it is the last of the zodiac, so it has all 12 zodiacs' wisdom within it. And sometimes that wisdom, when you only have like one or two placements in your chart or none at all like mine, that wisdom can be really hard to tap into. But the thing with Pisces energy is when it is healthy, it is the very warm center of your heart. It is the depths of the ocean. It is every emotion ever felt, but felt in a flow state. Whereas when it is unhealthy, sometimes they can lose themselves in other people or their surroundings, or they try to numb themselves because of the onslaught of emotions that they always have to deal with. Now, Virgo is an earth sign, so they're more grounded and more practical usually, but they are also ruled by Mercury, which rules the thoughts and mindsets and communication. So while Pisces can get lost in their feelings, Virgo can get lost in their logical thoughts. But if we find the medicine in this, we see that our love can be protected by logic and by these details, which I equate to having boundaries and setting boundaries and communicating those boundaries. If you have a certain set of standards that you want to uphold yourself and your life, a la the Virgo energy, you can apply those to the vastness that is the ability to love within pretty much most human beings. So that was the first reason that I felt like self-love was pretty important this week. But also the Venus and Mars conjunction in Aquarius only heightens this energy. Venus is all about the ability to receive and magnetize things to us. It is about what we hold dear, what we love, and what we value, where Mars is more of a protective energy with very strong boundaries, willpower, taking action, fighting for what matters to it, bravery. And I think that it requires bravery to be in a loving state, to be vulnerable with people. So, a conjunction is when two planets are merging or blending energies. And it can be kind of interesting to be both the initiator and the receiver with this Mars and Venus energy combining. But I liken it to the rose in witchcraft. The rose is one of actually my favorite. It didn't used to be because I always thought roses were basic, but it's now one of my favorite flowers other than daffodils. Daffodils are, I just love them. Anyway, but with roses, they are symbolic to me of what love should be because, and not just love romantically, but love in general, love of ourselves, our family, our friends, because the rose has this sweet scent and it's soft and it's beautiful and it's inviting. But if you're not gentle with it, you are pricked with thorns because you didn't respect it. And that is like the beautiful symbol of like, you can have my open, sweet, vulnerable side if you also respect my boundaries. And on the other end, not dethorning yourself so that everyone can have your fragrance and have your softness and have your vulnerability without any consequences. So learning to have boundaries to protect that side of yourself so that you're not taken advantage of or disrespected or just not treated well. And that really reminds me of Mars almost as the thorns in this scenario, and Venus obviously as the petals and the scent and the beauty of the rose. And I feel like that's kind of the combination that's happening leading up to this full moon is, and it's interesting actually to back myself up, that it's in Aquarius because Pisces is, like I said, I think I said, the connection to all of humanity, that we are all one being, just different facets of the universe being able to see and experience itself in its many different flavors, for lack of a better word. But Aquarius is a little bit more of an individual. They're a little more logical. They're more about embracing your authenticity, which is a sort of individual word. It's your uniqueness, your unique signature. So with Mars and Venus coming in to set boundaries with love when it comes to the individual, while we have this Virgo full moon setting boundaries with our love within humanity, I just felt called to talk about self-love and self-worth and boundaries and making sure that we're all set up for success this Pisces season. Pretty sure I said this in the beginning, but my very first ritual that I ever did, or my very first full moon ritual, pardon me, was a full moon ritual. And it was in Scorpio season, actually. But I had just started to learn about, wow, this is kind of crazy. I had just started to learn about the concept of self love being a good thing. I know, that's kind of wild, actually. But my whole life, I was sort of taught, I think I said this in the first episode, to put other people's preferences and values above my own. And even though I personally never agreed with it, my willpower had been worn down over time until it just became the easiest route to take, and then slowly became a belief of mine that to put what I wanted first, to put what mattered to me first, was not only selfish but cruel and a bad thing to do. Which I now know to be entirely opposite, but at the time I had been shamed and guilted and just treated terribly when it came to that. And so to learn that in the witchcraft community, in the spiritual and self development spaces, that to show yourself love was a good thing and was an encouraged thing was just shocking. Which, by the way, if you can hear, there's a cricket in my room, and there's been crickets in our house for like months. So I apologize if you can hear a cricket. Um, but anyway, back to the self-love talk. I I was shocked to see all of these people who were so wise and loving and selfless also care so much about self-love. And it really inspired me to learn how to be that way for myself. And it validated a feeling that I had had my whole life, that it didn't make sense to so fully sacrifice myself for other people without boundaries, without settings, without ever going back to center. And I didn't have words for it at the time, but now I do. And I can see that what it was is that we have been taught as a society for many reasons, which I will not talk about in this episode because then I'll go on a rant. But we've been taught as a society that we should never care for ourselves, that it is a sign of being egotistical, especially women or feminine types. But I think this also goes for a lot of men and just people in general, that there is a difference between loving ourselves and putting ourselves as above others. I think that's where the definitions get lost in translation. Taking care of yourself and loving yourself and believing in your self-worth allows you to not be taken advantage of, allows you to see your boundaries, allows you to align with people and with places and with energies that actually serve your highest good, that make you feel good, that treat you well. Whereas I guess the way that people would see it is being egotistical, where you're the only one who deserves it, nobody else. You're the only one who deserves good things, who deserves love, who deserves attention. You're better than other people, and that's why you deserve it. That is where it's unhealthy. And in the opposite side of I never deserve love, or I never deserve protection, or I never deserve boundaries, that's where it's unhealthy. We're never supposed to fully sacrifice ourselves for other people. We're supposed to align with what authentically feels good to us and what our truth is, at our core. And another very important thing, which I might have mentioned in a previous episode, but I'm not sure, because I say this a lot, but every single human being has inherent worth. There is no person who is better or worse than anyone else when they come into this world. There is no person who is more worthy of love or care or a good life right off the bat than anyone else. Now, I say right off the bat because I do believe that we earn things through the consequences of our actions, and that can lead to things that sort of upset the balance of what you're worthy of. But for most of us normal people who have genuinely good intentions and maybe have just been lost or traumatized or going through a healing journey, the reminder that you are inherently worthy and really believing that can really save you. It saved me anyway. There was a time where I didn't want to be here, and I didn't want to be myself. And over the years of this spiritual journey, I find myself actually happy to be alive and happy to be me. And everything that I share on this podcast is to help you, if you're in the same place, be happy to be alive and be happy to be yourself. Because the thing is, when we are happy to be ourselves, we align with the people who are happy to be around who that self is. And before you say, well, no one would want to be around that self, shut up. There are literally 7 billion human beings in this world. You think there's not a single other human being who wants to be around your true self? That is a lie. That is a lie that you are telling yourself because you're afraid to step out of your comfort zone of hating yourself. And I know this because that's where I was. I always felt kind of like on the outside and left out of things, and like I was constantly speaking a language that nobody else understood. And I have had many, many losses in my life, which I will try to mostly go over in a different episode because I have a plan about talking about loss and grief on the spiritual journey. But I'm sure it'll slip in here as well because self-love and taking care of yourself aligns a lot with the relationships in your life, both platonic and romantic. So that is all to say that taking care of yourself is a good thing, and it is also good for all of us that you take care of yourself and that you love yourself. And I didn't really quite understand what loving myself really meant because I was like I knew how to show love to other people. Like I knew how to take care of them and put them first, but I didn't quite understand what it meant to put myself first. And it started off with witchcraft rituals because the self-love ritual was a bath, actually. It was like a bath with candles and herbs and oils, and you play music and you just meditate in the water, and like you basically give yourself a little spa day, and that was a full ritual. And I didn't really do self-care stuff like that for myself at the time. I still sometimes struggle with doing that kind of stuff, but definitely not as bad as it was then. I at the time I didn't know how to take care of myself properly. I was barely feeding myself. It was bad. Like it was really bad. And it was just because I kept centering everyone else and everything else, including, weirdly enough, like my work, because if you listened to my first episode, my work was like my identity, and it was a way that I was able to strangely pretend to do something for myself that was actually abandoning myself. So I would think that I was doing all this hard work on my books purely for me, when really the amount that I was working was just to hopefully be validated by people outside of me. And I was burning myself out, and it was affecting my health mentally and physically. And so to slow down with witchcraft and see how hard I was treating myself, like how critical I was on myself, and to see like how much softer that I could and should be, it was miraculous. And it took a little bit of time because it started with simple things, like I said, like the bath ritual, where you were basically soaking yourself in a giant potion and you're absorbing all of the goods of that potion energetically, while into the water you're whispering all the things that you want to release and remove. And this is under a full moon, which is also really good for releasing magic. Um, and so I told the water all the things that I wanted to get rid of. And you don't have to do this in a bath, you can also do it in the shower. But like as you're like scrubbing down, you can be like, as I cleanse myself physically, I also cleanse myself energetically or emotionally or whatever of this thing that no longer serves me, whatever it is you're working on at the time. And then after I'd soaked in the tub, I would unplug the bath and I would say that the water going down the drain was taking away what I released and removing it from me and my life forevermore. And then once the water was gone, the spell was done. And so simple things like that. I would also set intentions on my tea and my coffee, which I would love to talk about in a future episode because coffee magic's like one of my favorite things. And I actually need to get better about going back into that, but that was like one of my favorite first spells. Anyway, so when it came to self love, I would start with easy self care things, but I would slowly learn that self love also comes hand in hand with self accountability and with responsibility and with boundaries. But it sometimes was stopping myself from self sabotage or stopping myself from aligning with people or energies that didn't show me the same amount of love and care in return. Because something I learned about myself during the self love practice is that when I love very deeply. Whether it's platonic or romantic, I care very much about the people that I allow in my energy. But I'm also very observant and I try to watch how people behave, and I keep track with myself of, am I okay with this behavior? Am I okay with that behavior? And I communicate my boundaries based off of needs based, I suppose. And then after I've communicated my boundaries, I have to uphold them. And that's sort of where the responsibility side comes in. But with this Virgo full moon, Pisces is a reminder of compassion and forgiveness. So there can be a time where your boundaries are maybe a little too tall. Like, nobody can get in. And that's not what they're supposed to do. They're just supposed to protect what you already have going for you. They're not supposed to become a fortress that nobody can enter, because then you're just isolating yourself, which is where the Aquarius energy comes in, because they can sometimes feel a little isolated if they can't find their community. And usually the reason they can't find their community is because they stay the black sheep in their circle instead of going off to find the other black sheep, if that makes sense. But with Pisces, with the forgiveness, Um, they're all about the fact that we're all going through our life for the first time. And we've had past lives, I believe, but it is mostly that we are conscious of this lifetime. Like, this lifetime is the first time we've had this lifetime. And so being too hard and too critical on other people who probably know just as much as you do about life is not always the best standpoint. And that sometimes we should be looking at people with compassion and forgiveness and allowing them to grow and evolve and become better people that could be worthy of being in your life, even if they've made mistakes in the past. Granted, with accountability, because I believe that when it comes to self-love, when it comes to caring about yourself, you have to hold people accountable, including yourself. You have to say, I'm okay with giving out second chances as long as there is change, as long as I can tell that something has shifted and I'm not just letting people get away with hurting or disrespecting me. And so I think that's where this Virgo and Pisces mixture is balanced, is when we're able to be forgiving and open-hearted and compassionate to people, while also saying, okay, this is where I draw the line for this future outcome. And then you have to be strong enough, if that future outcome ever does happen where they do the thing you told them not to hold that boundary. And it's hard. It's hard. I've done it and it's hard. I had to go no contact with my mother a few years ago, and it was one of the more difficult things that I've ever done. And part of what caused me to go no contact was that exact thing of I set a boundary that kept being disrespected over and over again while I was trying to process something that had already hurt me. And I was not given the time to process, and I kept being interrupted over and over again despite asking many times for space and distance. And it was because of those boundaries constantly being crossed over and over again in very flagrant ways that I had to finally uphold it and just completely cut connection. But because I was able to do that, it has made it easier to spot with newer connections that I definitely have stronger boundaries now. It doesn't always make it easier, but it's easier to logically know when to do so, even if emotionally it's still difficult. But the no contact part is something that you can like decide on and soften over time. But I think that holding boundaries is meant to be something personal and something that you develop in your self-love practice. And by learning what you believe you deserve is how you learn how to uphold these boundaries and how to decide when to forgive and when to not. And that's sort of where the Mars in Aquarius comes in. Is Mars is definitely not actually, I guess you could say it's forgiving, but maybe not in the moment, because Mars is sort of like a very like burst of energy type planet. So in the moment, it's going to be very fierce and it's going to uphold its boundaries, and it's going to say like, I don't like that you spoke to me like that, you know. Whereas over time though, it's going to get over it. Like, it's not the type to hold grudges. Whereas maybe Pluto, which actually Pluto is involved this week too. I kind of forgot. Mars, Venus, and Pluto are all together. So if there are nefarious things happening in your life, definitely go ahead, hold those grudges. But if it's something a little bit less serious, the Mars and Venus energy is probably better for you. But if it's like the deepest, most terrible form of betrayal, like I'm talking like epic level, then maybe get that Pluto energy in there and that empowerment energy. Um, and then with that Virgo full moon, just release. But otherwise, I do feel like the energies right now are telling us that what are you doing right now that is stopping you from being kind to yourself? What are you doing right now that is stopping you from aligning with what you love, with what loves you, with what makes you feel loved? If you're aligning yourself with people who don't care about you, or if you're aligning yourself even with a job that doesn't care about you, or if you're aligning yourself with sometimes aligning yourself with the lack of something, like avoiding things, or removing things that you actually care about, can be just as bad as clinging to something. That's actually also because Pisces can be a very stereotypically clingy sign, whereas Virgo is usually like, okay, bye. um, and then with the Mars and Venus and Aquarius, it's definitely like, if you love me for who I am, if you care about me for who I am, then you will be brave and overcome the thorns, and you will be gentle with the thorns, and you will be gentle with who I am as a person, so I don't have to uphold the thorny side of me. And that's kind of the energy of this week, I would say. It's kind of a complicated energy. Pisces just makes things more complicated in general. It's definitely a kind of energy that I saw a post on Instagram saying that there's certain movies and TV shows that came out during Pisces season, and one of them was Alice in Wonderland, and which is actually a story that I've always like loved. I've read that book so many times, including Through the Looking Glass. But with Alice in Wonderland, it's that vibe is very Piscean to me. I get it. I see it. I think it also had Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which now that I've seen it all the way through makes a lot of sense. There is this idealism, there is this romance that's very like epic. Um, there's this, no matter what dark or difficult thing you've bonded with someone over, you can still try to find forgiveness in the end. But with Alice in Wonderland, it's like the nonsense. Like everything is just guided by feelings and nothing is logical, and you just have to follow your heart. And sometimes your heart can lead you to strange, strange places, and you meet strange, strange people that way. But yeah, so it's kind of a weird week, but I just wanted to come on here and share a little bit about self love and self worth and self care, and that you are worthy of taking care of yourself. This will probably be something that I bring up a lot in further podcasts because it is a core belief of mine and something I've worked on a lot. Oh, one last thing before I end the podcast is that when you do finally start pouring into yourself, you're going to start to notice an uncomfortable amount of extra energy that you did not used to have, because that energy was being poured into other people or into other things, like I was saying with my writing, so it could be work. And it's going to feel so uncomfortable. You're going to feel restless and anxious, and you're not going to know what to do. That's when you try to find more and more things of yourself that matter to you to pour into, and they will pour back into you in return. That's how you can tell you're aligned with good things, is you feel good when you're aligned with them, when you talk to them, when you work on that thing, when and sometimes you can love something that doesn't love you in return, of course, but allow yourself to feel that love because it's coming from you, and that's beautiful that you're able to create that, whether or not it's reciprocated. But most of the time, it's been very rare that if I follow my joy and my spark and my love and the things that matter to me, that they haven't eventually become something that's helped fulfill my life. And but especially things that have had to do with me, where I'm in control, like there's no other people involved, and it just felt good to just do that thing. um, but when other people are involved, that's where boundaries come in, and maybe things start off well and then they don't, and you have to decide how to set your boundaries then. So I hope that this all resonated with you and that it was what you needed to hear before the full moon. You will probably be hearing this during the height of the Mars and Venus conjunction, um, which could also be very spicy, let me say. So just, be careful, wear protection, all that fun stuff. But have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will talk with you next Wednesday. If I do happen to make another episode this week as a little bonus, which will be a surprise even to myself at the moment, then you can go on to the next episode. But otherwise, I will speak with you next week, and thank you for joining me.